It is a cosmic vision. These ancient writers in this ancient letter, he is trying to give this congregation that he's writing to, this church, a certain sense of the importance of their shared work as the church in a particular place, in a particular time. Paul is trying to say, good job, keep doing it. Now, he has some things for them to think about in their life together. But in this beginning, he has something to share with them about the ordering of the universe and the place that this Christ has in this ordering. Now, for those of us who are reading it 2,000 years later, it shouldn't surprise us that part of this ordering is related to the way these ancient people understood the universe in very kind of concrete ways. Kind of a flat earth and the firmament, and then you had the underworld. And so they had this way of thinking about all things in these kind of very kind of concrete ways. And so he talks about Christ being part of this body called the church. So the church is a body, which is an organic kind of way of thinking about it. And of course, bodies are systems, and bodies are complex, and bodies are important in the world. And then he says that Christ is the head of the body called the church. Now, often we read this and our ears perk up a bit, because many of us struggle with this idea of having someone over us, right? So we think of head of something, and we think a boss. We think power over. We think someone who's lording over us. And certainly these folks who are hearing this story for the first time might have some of those same connotations. I mean, they knew what the emperor in Rome was doing. He was the head of the empire, and that wasn't going well. They knew what the prefect, the local leader on behalf of the emperor, was up to, and that wasn't good. They knew what the head of the legions was up to as they went around neighbor to neighbor to take taxes from them, and then that wasn't good. And so you can imagine that in their imagination, like in our imagination, there are some concerns about this. And when we read it today, it does the same thing for us, too. What does it mean to be the head? And what does it mean to be the body? So now, just for a second, kind of go with me in this. And we need to kind of imagine this. Let's go to the organic idea. So the body it's part of a system, and the head is part of that system. And by the way, the head cannot exist without the body, and the body cannot exist without the head. In other words, although we tend to think about these things in hierarchical ways, there is very little hierarchical thing here. It's just part of a whole body that necessitates all the systems for it to work together. And in these ancient worlds, the heart actually was the center of knowing things, right? And so imagine in that kind of organic way that Paul is trying to help them understand that Christ is it's not just a deep part of who they are, but Christ is embedded in who they are as this body. Christ is a pivotal aspect of who they are as this body. Christ is there in some real ways, helping them see certain things and hear certain things and experience certain things in particular ways. So that's the image that we have for us today. If Christ is the head, then Christ helps this community have a vision for a particular future. And that vision has to be constantly being thought about. That vision needs to be constantly checked, and we need to allow that to be our eyes and our ears. It is Christ who allows us to help us understand what we're to be about. Where are we heading, right? Which direction of travel are we taking? That's what allows us to do that as the body called the church. The other part is that if we're a body, and later Paul actually talks about us being part of a body with many members, and all of us have a role to play here, then that means that every member of the body called the church is pivotal to its function. So if Christ is the head, and the head allows for the direction of travel for seeing and hearing and kind of guiding, right, which way we go, then every other aspect works alongside that so that we have a wholeness in our life together. So every particular member of this one body is pivotal so that we can head in the direction that Christ leads us into. And that direction towards healing and wholeness and completion and love, that direction requires this body for it to fulfill its work in the world. So this is a beautiful, beautiful image as we think about our role together as the church. But there's something else happening here that I want us to kind of think about together. So in these days, there's a lot of ink being spilled about the church and its function in the world. There's a lot of conversations about the so-called decline of the church. And by the way, I will not deny that the numbers are true. In other words, there has been a decline in folks who say they're connected to a congregation, a Christian congregation. There's certainly been a decline in people who tell us that they believe in God. There's certainly been a decline in people that are engaged in the life of the community over time. And there's a growing number of folks who are disconnected from what we might traditionally call the church, from this body that we're discussing together. And we should for sure pay attention to that. And maybe you who are listening to me in this very moment are one of those that have one foot in this Christian community and one foot not there, right? And we need to pay attention to that. But the reality of it is that no matter what those numbers tell us, that at our core, what we do together as this body, the body of Christ in the world, with Christ as the head, giving us that sense of vision and that sense of hearing and that sense of direction, being a visible aspect of who we are, that movement is still needed in our world. Our world still necessitates this vision of Christ, of the sacredness of all of created beings, of all of creation. This sense that the holy inhabits this creation, and that this creation is part and parcel of this divine life. It is the evidence and the concrete way in which this divine life appears around us. And so this body called the church is needed in the world. And it's needed for us to be agents of healing. It's needed for us to be agents of reconciliation. It's needed for us to come alongside one another when difficulty comes in our lives, but it's also needed for us to be a witness to love and goodness and grace in the world. It's needed because humans were not built to be alone. We from the very early ways in which our evolutionary ancestors kind of walked the earth, from the very beginning, there's been a necessity for community, for the complex networking of different human beings so that we together then can flourish. In fact, humanity can only flourish in community together, in companionship with one another. And so as we think of ourselves and as we begin to imagine, part of using the eyes of Christ and the ears of Christ is that we begin to recognize that part of our direction of travel is to be witnesses to that reality for others in the world, especially to those that might not be connected to the community that we are building here and that we have been building for a long time. And so in that witness together, it's not coercive, it's not manipulative, it's not driven by guilt or shame. No, it's driven. If we're seeing like Jesus sees, and if we're hearing like Jesus hears, and if we're guiding together using Jesus as our guide in this body, then it's all about human flourishing and goodness and grace and mercy and reconciliation and forgiveness. That's what we model, and that's what we do together as a body. We exercise the muscles of that way of being in the world, and we gather together week after week, month after month, year after year together. We gather in praise for sure. We gather to be reminded of our identity. But then we leave this space and then become bearers of what we have experienced, of this divine life that we experience day after day, week after week, year after year. There are complexities and imperfections in this way of being in the world because we're human. We're going to mess it up. We're not going to always model the right way of being in the world. But then we too model what forgiveness and reconciliation looks like. One of my big fears is not really that the church dies. First of all, because I believe that though some particular churches are dying, and that's okay. It's part of the rhythm of any grouping of humans, right? That those gatherings, those bodies have their own life cycles. What I often fear is that any particular community loses its zeal to be about our work of love and reconciliation and justice and peace in the world. That we get so sometimes distracted and sometimes disheartened that we lose sight of that which guides us, of the head, of that vision, of that direction of travel, that we get so caught up in ourselves that we think, oh, we're disembodied from one another and from Christ. So today, the Apostle Paul, who writes this letter to the Ephesians, reminds us to get reconnected, to see ourselves as part of this body, a body in which divine life is not just a key aspect of it, but provides us the vision for a continued life forward. When you read the news and look at the notifications on your iPhone, there's a lot to be concerned about. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of things that don't align to the God we proclaim. Then it's even more important that you, wherever you are in your journey, that you get reconnected to the body that we call the church. That you allow the divine life that is the head to give us together, give us a vision for the future. So that then we can be agents of healing. So that we can be agents of reconciliation. So that we can be agents of human flourishing for us, for our neighbor, and for the world. So church, let us be that body and let divine life guide us in that way. What an opportunity. What a joy. What a need. Now that's good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.